Well, welcome to Crimson Chronicles, and tonight we have a superstar in contemporary Christian music, Steven Curtis Chapman. This is the most awarded artist in Christian music history, five-time Grammy winner, 60 Dove Awards, 50 number one singles, was inducted into the Grand Ole Opry last year. He's a multi-decade shaping Christian contemporary music star. With his wife, Mary Beth, Stephen is the co founder of Show Hope, a nonprofit that helps restore the hope of a family to orphans. He is also the father of a Crimson Tide cheerleader, Stevie Joy, as well as Shoei, who finished Alabama a couple years ago. So he is an official honorary Bama Dad. And Stephen, it is so good to see you again.
Thank you, bud. Great to see you guys. Good to be with you.
Man,
Thanks for having me.
Steven, we're so glad to have you. It's going to be a lot of fun for us to be able to catch up and talk a little bit about Alabama sports, but a little bit about your career and all the things God's done with you. We're excited. So thanks for joining us, man.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Well, Stephen, let's get started. You've had a legendary career in Christian music. I remember listening to you back in your mullet days in the 80s and 90s, and
Oh, yeah.
quite a legendary career. But when you look back, what moments most clearly confirmed your calling into Christian music?
It's a interesting question because, one of I guess for those who know my music and have listened to my music over the years, an album that was one of those, key kind of moments in my journey was an album called For the Sake of the Call. And there's obviously always been a lot of language around, what I do, with that word call. When were you called to ministry? That's a common, phrase and kind of an idea that a lot of people will talk about. And I remember early on feeling very insecure about that, honestly, just to be completely candid, because I would hear people talk about, man, I just remember, this moment when God said, to my heart, my spirit, this is what you're going to do. Matthew West tells a story of sitting at a Steven Curtis Chapman concert, and Champagne Ellen wrote a song about it called The Sound of a Life Changing. And I wrote it. I helped him write it. He called me and said, would you write this with me? Because I was sitting in your concert watching you and I had tears in my eyes. I think he was in high school or college, early college. And realized that was a moment when I felt like God saying, this is what you're going to do with your life. Bart Millard tells a similar story, guys that are I'm a fan of their music, but would use my music in a moment in their lives. And I remember thinking, gosh, did I have one of those moments? Am I supposed to be doing this? Cause I'm not really sure I can point to that moment when there was a specific call. And then I remember reading something from one of my mentors that I will meet in heaven, Oswald Chambers, who of course wrote or spoke, and his wife was the one who actually wrote all of his words down to create the great devotional, just legendary, impactful in so many of our lives, My Utmost for His Highest. And he had one of his entries in there was basically the gist of it was what we often call the process, God calls the end, talking about the journey, what we see as, the process to get to some big goal. God is much more concerned about just showing up and doing the process. There's another great phrase he uses, trust God and do the next thing. And as I look back over my journey, I began to realize that the call for me to do this was a process. It's still a process. It's still an ongoing, process. And that seems to be, at least in my experience, and all of us have a different, story to tell in that regard. But for me, it was really a process, a journey of, the music that I grew up loving most was Christian music, the music that helped shape my understanding of who God is and who Jesus is in my life was Christian music. A great artist, Dallas Holm, who probably influenced me as much as anyone, both through his albums and when I would go see him in concert. The way he handled the gift that God had entrusted to him really had an impact on my life. And so when I started writing music, that was the music that I was most compelled to write. Were songs, even as a kid in high school and going into college, were songs about my faith journey. And, reading scripture and books that would influence me, and messages and ideas. And so, that was just a kind of the natural course. And I was not originally setting out to pursue music. I say a pre-med major, which means I was a pre-med, because I was in the first semester taking just the very earliest courses that might eventually lead me into a pre-med major. And I was already struggling with calculus and chemistry at the college level. I did all right in high school, but it was a whole thing in college. And I was around that time I was writing songs, and some songs that I had written had found their way into the hands of the guy who I would say probably one of the most influential songwriters for the church in the last, 50, 60 years, Bill Gaither. I grew up singing songs in church with my family, and in the choir, we would sing, the Bill Gaither choral series. There was volumes of them. He had so many songs, and very much influenced me in my songwriting and all of that. And he heard some songs I had written and took an interest in those. And I got a phone call from him. I was in my first semester in college, not pursuing music because my dad had encouraged me to go get a real job. Music, my dad played music, teaches guitar lessons still. He's 87 years old. He still teaches guitar lessons in his little music store in Paducah, Kentucky. And he had eked out a living for our family. We were great. As far as I knew, we never lacked anything, but he said, it's really been feeding the family playing a guitar. So I would encourage you to go get a real job, go to college, get an education, and you can always do music, afterwards. And so I was kind of, trying to honor my dad, and it sounded like wisdom, even though it wasn't necessarily the path that I was feeling called to. I just thought this was the next thing I should do. And when I got that phone call from Bill Gaither, interested in publishing some of my songs, and which would eventually lead to me having a relationship with Bill and Gloria Gaither, writing songs, being mentored by him, really, and taught by him, getting my first publishing contract, which would eventually lead to me getting to record some of my songs. And that would lead to me, having a recording contract and making records. I would say that phone call was definitely one of those moments when I felt like, okay, I like this call. I like this phone call. And if this is a call from God, I would love to pursue this. And called my dad and promptly and said, Dad, I got a call from Bill Gaither. He thinks I'm a pretty good songwriter and thinks, that I might have something here. And at that point, my dad said, well, I think it'd be a good idea to chase that a little, down. It's where God might be taking all this. And so that was definitely one moment that I would say I think it was beginning to become clear that maybe God was opening a way for me to do this.
And well, we're incredibly glad that God sent you off on this journey. And I think, I've told you before, I feel like that your music and your music catalog is the soundtrack to my life and most of the people, of my generation. And it's and man, you've written songs that come from places of deep joy, songs that come from places of deep sorrow. Steven, how do you approach songwriting, but both as a creative enterprise, but also as a spiritual discipline?
People have asked over the years, how do you write a song? How do you, how do you approach that? And the mysterious thing, and probably what I love about music, what I love about songs, as both as a listener, but especially as a writer, is that there is such a wonder to it for me and a mystery. I've often been asked, "Hey, would you consider teaching a songwriting course? Would you be interested in doing this?" And a lot of times I'm just like, I don't want to tell them the truth, but I don't really know that I would know how to teach someone because I don't, it just was something that came out of me. I think but then when I began to experience, music that impacted my faith, then that was that was the deepest level. That was because that was the most important thing in my life, even as a young man. So I think that as far as how I then began to approach songs, I mean, my first song was a song called "When Christ Comes." But actually, it was called "Well Done." And it was the message of, it was basically written around the parable of the talents, as it was called in the scripture, the Bible that I was reading. That was the parable of, the ruler who calls in 3 servants and entrusts, to them different amounts of, talent was the word that was used in the version I was reading at the time. And, he goes away, comes back, and some of the servants have been very good stewards of what they've been entrusted, and one not so much. And the ones that were, heard this from their master, heard these words, "Well done, good and faithful servant." And from that, I took, if God's entrusted talent to me, if he's entrusted whatever he's entrusted to me, I want to use it in a way that will honor him and will ultimately bring him glory. And without knowing it, I think my very first song was, in essence, a mission statement that I might use it in a way that God would say, "Well done, good and faithful servant."
Wow. Well, Stephen, about a year ago, I know Rick and I both had the honor of being in Nashville for your induction into the Grand Ole Opry. And that's just one of the thousands of places that you have played through the years, internationally and across this nation. What feels most sacred about performing live now compared to earlier in your career? Let's talk about the differences
Yeah.
in the '90s as opposed.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing that I hear people say, well, I'll tell you, this is a story that a lady told me a few years ago, and it really, I remember it very clearly. It really impacted me. She said, I love Christian music. I've listened to Christian music for many, many years, just found so much comfort and so much encouragement and just played all the time. And she said, and then I went through a very, very tragic loss. She lost a child. And she said, I really wasn't able to listen to Christian music for a while because so many of these songs that had comforted me and encouraged me, I always had this sort of voice, in the back of my head saying, "Yeah, but you don't know what the storm is that I've been through. You don't know. Now that I've experienced this, this kind of loss, this kind of pain, I don't, I don't know if, if I can listen to that the same anymore." And she said, and then you wrote an album called "Beauty Will Rise" after you lost your daughter, Maria. And she said that those songs were the only thing that I could connect with in that dark valley, because I knew these were coming from someone who had walked that journey. And it wasn't just someone singing songs to me, but it was someone, singing from very similar place to where I had been. And to me, those are the scriptures that, I mean, for all of us, aren't they the ones that really, especially as we live some life and walk through, wrestle with doubts and questions and, "God, where are you? And how long, O Lords," that we all find ourselves saying. suddenly when you see that in the Psalms and you feel like, wait a minute, I'm allowed to wrestle in that way, because God didn't edit that out of Scripture. Or Paul saying, gosh, I am weak, but he is strong in my weakness. And so I'm going to boast in my weakness. I'm like, wow, okay, I can connect with that, and I think that is what people will tell me. I had an album, my most recent full album was called Still. And that whole album was really written from a place of, these are things that I was singing the same truths and messages because it's God's word, you know, 35, 38 years ago. And I can still sing those songs now, but there's, an even deeper understanding because I've walked in places that it is proven true. I sang My Redeemer is Faithful and True on my first album. I wrote that song when I was, 20 in my, 20s, I guess, late 20s. And that song, I always say you can pick a least favorite sometimes, but you can't supposed to pick a favorite.
That's true.
And yet I often reference that song because I say, I sang that song and wrote it on my very first album. But if I was told I had just enough time on the clock, to sing one more song, what would it be? And that would be the one. That's always the one I say, that would be the song, because that song says what every other song I feel like I've written over the years. But now when I sing it, it carries so much more weight because the journey that I've been on. So I guess to answer that question in long form, it's really just the difference of, living life, being on the journey, and being able to say, it really is true. He really is faithful. I can say that now, having tested that, and he has proven to be faithful and true on this journey.
As we think about just all the songs that you've written, everything you've recorded, I mean, such an extensive catalog of songs. And I don't want to ask you what your favorite is. Which is the song that surprises you the most about how it connects with people through all the years?
Well, again, long list, all of them, probably in some ways, but the first song that popped into my mind is I Will Be Here. That's a song that probably is known as a Steven Curtis Chapman song as any I've got. And the interesting thing of that song, I remember the first time I recorded it, I remember my producer saying to me, as we had just finished me singing the vocal on that song, and he said, boy, this song's going to get sung at a lot of weddings. And I remember looking at him saying, you think so? I don't see it. And he said, well, yeah, of course. And I said, no, who wants to sing tomorrow morning? I mean, you're standing there, you're looking at, the love of your life, you're starting your journey, and you say, the first words are, tomorrow morning, if you wake up and the sun does not appear, I will be here. If in the dark we lose sight of love, hold my hand and have no fear, I will be here. I'll be here when you feel like being quiet, when you need to speak. And that's written after my mom and dad divorced. And it was a very scary time for my wife and I, because my mom and dad were and still are living followers of Jesus. They got, just deceived and got isolated and from fellowship and from others, and the enemy, the thief that comes to steal, kill, and destroy, did a number on their marriage. And my wife and I were looking at each other with 4 years of our journey under our belt, our journey, and thinking, man, these guys had it together. I thought my mom and dad, they divorce. I heard them say it 1,000 times. Divorce is not even a word in our vocabulary. It's not, and then suddenly their marriage had dissolved. And so that song was written out of just a sort of steely determination to go, whatever comes, we said until death separates us. And so I really, really want that to be true. I want to honor that, whatever happened. And I'm saying this to you again. I'm saying it in light of this scary time that we're in right now. And I'm going to sing it, to as many people as will listen, because then I'm that much more accountable to this promise that I'm making to you and to God to be here. And so it was interesting that song would turn into such a very well-known wedding song, because it wasn't written in a moment, happy anniversary. Let me just pour my heart out to you of how wonderful it is to be in love with you. It was, man, this is really hard and scary, but whatever comes, let's hang on, and God will carry us through it. So that's probably one that, would be right at the top of that list of that question.
Yeah. All right, Stephen. Now we're going to talk about Bama.
Oh boy.
I love the
Let's
love
go.
your hood.
Roll
The hoodie
Tide.
you got. Roll Tide. All right. So you have become somewhat of a honorary member of the Crimson Tide family. 2 daughters graduating. Joey graduated a couple of years ago. Stevie Joy is there now. One of Alabama's cheerleaders. 5 seasons as Alabama's cheerleader. How did
Yeah.
that connection begin for you? And what's it been like to become a Bama football and basketball fan through your family? Go
Yeah.
through that process with us.
Yeah. Well, so we got acclimated to Alabama football in particular from so my son, Caleb, my oldest son, Caleb married a amazing young lady, Julia Anderson, that he had grown up with. They were basically 4th grade sweethearts. And her little brother was Will Franklin, Caleb's little brother's best buddy. They played basketball together. They came to an Alabama camp, basketball camp, when
Yeah.
Coach Godfrey was the coach. I came to that basketball camp with Will Franklin. First time I'd ever been in Tuscaloosa on Bama campus. And Will was probably 9 years old. And Will was our baller. I mean, he was all in, played basketball all the way through high school. He's about my height, so he wasn't going to go very far. But then these friends of ours, as we would grow, as Caleb and Julia, his now wife, would grow closer, and we would spend a lot of time with Reggie and Karen Anderson. Reggie's a doctor. Karen, his wife, just amazing, incredible, dear friends of ours. So they both went to Alabama. And so anytime we were at their house, we'd go over on Saturday and play. We'd watch Alabama football, especially now Mary Beth, and she may come in at any moment because she's like, Alabama podcast without me, because she said, you're going to embarrass all of us. And she said, I need to be there because she should. And so they actually love to tell a story on me that I really should not tell on this podcast, but I think I've told it probably to you, Tommy, but that we played this game called Celebrity, where they put names of someone that people should know in, you write it on a paper and you put it in a little box, and then you pass it around and people pull out a name, and you get clues, and you give clues about who this person is, it's President, Gettysburg Address, and, Abe Lincoln, and, I pull out this name, Nick Saban, and I got nothing.
Oh,
This
wow.
was many years ago. This was a lifetime ago, right? Okay. So anyway, I got severely reprimanded and was quickly, we got to give you a crash course. This was still before we had any idea that any of our girls would be at Alabama. So I did get acclimated to, Alabama football through our friends and through my wife, who is still just like, how did I end up marrying this guy? So clueless. But when we were, Shoei was looking, our first of ours, so we have 6 kids. You guys know this. We have 3 biological and three adopted daughters, and so three a daughter and two sons, naturally born, and then my wife says, and then three supernatural daughters, and so when Shohana, our oldest of our three adopted daughters, was looking at colleges, she's very bright. She was looking at Ivy League. She was looking at, Dukes and Vanderbilt, because it's here in Nashville. And she's like, I'm going to go to, a school like that. 'Cause she's 35 on the, she's like just crushing academically. And a friend of ours at a board meeting of our organization, Show Hope, which Rick knows very well, and an organization that really assists families in the adoption journey, and has just been a beautiful part of our lives now for 23 years. Started when we adopted Shoei, but when Shoei was looking at colleges, a friend of mine sitting at a board meeting for Show Hope had a daughter that was maybe a year ahead of Shoei, and she was being recruited to come to Alabama as a pole vaulter. She had very similar test scores and a very similar academic experience that Shoei did, and was looking at all the top kind of schools around the country. And she went and visited Alabama, and he was telling me, you got to take Shoei and visit Alabama's honors college and just meet some of these people. I think you will be very impressed. And I think Shoei will be impressed. And so we did. We came to Alabama, and we met with, went to the college, met with, at the time, Dr. Sharp was the dean college, and Jacqueline Morgan was the associate dean, and both just amazing people, and just one after another. Met this character, Tommy Ford. This is a really great guy, and these are some amazing people, and so God just started kind of directing her path, and she left her visit with Alabama and said, I really think this might be where I'm supposed to be. So fast forward, Shoei gets there. She's a capstone woman. She's a university fellow, is in the University Fellows program. She's in the honors college. She's just crushing it. And Stevie Joy, a few years behind her, knows she wants to go to a top level cheer program. She had looked at Alabama, kind of had her heart set on University of Kentucky, because they had at the time, kind of the top tier cheer program. They had a big shakeup that happened her junior year of high school. And she, from that, really switched her focus to Alabama. And with her coaches there, said, you come here and we'll get that national championship. And guess what? Won the national championship. And so it's been an amazing, just, you really, I can't say enough about just how God directed, our steps to be there for these now. Gosh, Stevie's in her 5th year, and Shoei was there for 4 years, got 2 degrees, 2 undergrads, and got a master's in social work. And so I guess we've been there, 7 or 8 years, and it's been amazing.
Yeah. Well, it has been fun, and just seeing you and Mary Beth and the enthusiasm y'all have for Alabama athletics. But how does being a Bama dad and a Bama mom that Mary Beth is compare to the kind of nerves that you feel before a big concert? Like when you go to a game, I've
Yeah.
seen you cheer. I've seen Mary Beth
Yeah.
cheer.
I
I mean,
I've told Mary
well,
Beth, and I do not know why in the world I get so worked up. I get so mad. I'm like, who is this guy? What is wrong? It is a game. I know it matters. I know it's important, but does it really matter as much as I'm feeling right now inside? Because I am feeling just like, and it's just such an amazing phenomenon, I guess, what athletics and college athletics, sitting in Bryant-Denny Stadium, and obviously having your daughter down there on the field cheering and, being a part of it. But I would say now at this point in my career, the nerves, you kind of know how to do what you're doing. Nothing even close to, what I'm feeling sitting there when we're getting beat by a certain team from Oklahoma going, what is going on right now? How is this happening? And I'm sitting this friend who's from Oklahoma. I was like, well, this was a mistake. What did I do inviting this guy here? Anyway, so I can get pretty, I get pretty invested, I guess you'd say.
Okay, Stephen, you're the most celebrated and awarded Christian artist in history. So you have tradition. You've been great at what you've done. You have a legacy in the Christian. You mentioned all the artists that have come to you and said that they had inspiration by listening to your music. Chris Tomlin is another one. I sent y'all that video the other day where he
Oh
mentioned
yeah.
that
Yeah.
that you were his inspiration in writing a lot of his songs. But so you got tradition, legacy in the Christian music world. Alabama has it in the college football world. Do you see any parallels between Alabama's culture and the values that have guided your life and your ministry?
I guess just obviously working, diligently working hard. Obviously Alabama, where legends are made, you don't get that, that said of you or even say it of yourself unless, there have been legends created, and certainly no program, especially in the football world, has produced as many legends as Alabama football has. Um, it's it's different in the sense that, again, it's not being trying to be all shucks or falsely humble. I am completely amazed at all of the opportunities I've had, all of the blessings and the ways that I have had success in the field of music and Christian music. There's nobody more surprised. There's not ever a point where I think, I worked really hard and, I earned this or deserved this. There are people who work just as hard, and I would say very, very honestly and convinced that they have way more talent. But some of that is just God's favor, God's, just how it happens, the timing and being at a certain place and at a certain time, and only God knows, why you get those opportunities, and it connects with people at a time.
Yeah, and I feel the same way, having worked at the university for almost 38 years,
Yeah.
that God's hand was on that. And I could
Yeah.
name 3 or 4 people in my life that enabled me to have the career that I did,
Yeah.
you know, meeting folks like Steven Curtis and Mary Beth Chapman, has been a highlight. But talking about Stevie Joy, your cheerleader, you and Mary Beth rarely miss a game unless you're on tour or you've got an obligation across the country. You're
Yeah.
there, and
Yeah.
right there in the South Field Suites, cheering on you, Stevie Joy. And are there any interesting travel stories to Tuscaloosa or to a memorable road game?
To travel to the Rose Bowl, that was
Yeah.
other than the outcome of the game was, not at all what we would have hoped for or desired. But, that was an amazing experience for us, growing up watching the Rose Bowl parade and, thinking my daughter, I mean, it was a very, very, emotional thing watching Joy run out on that field. And, because here's a little girl that, was what we understand, from the when we adopted her, they give you whatever medical information they have. And, Stevie was, found, in and brought into an orphanage, just found
Hmm.
out front of a police station. They was what the report said, in a little box wrapped up in a jacket. She was 3 pounds. She was very, very, you know, and when we even adopted her, she was about 6 months old, and she was still at 6 months. She was, I think, barely 8 or 9 pounds. She was tiny, and she's tiny now, but she is put her up against any athlete in the Alabama program anyway, as good of an athlete as I think Alabama has, and conditioned and just strong and fierce and fearless. But, to think this little, barely alive little girl would, be running out on the field at the Rose Bowl, to cheer on the great Alabama football team. There have been some pretty taste and see the Lord is good moments for us, for sure.
I remember calling Jennifer Thrasher, the cheerleader sponsor, and telling her of y'all's interest in Alabama. The fact that Stevie was thinking about going to Kentucky, and then
Yeah.
the things happened up there. And
Yeah.
well, Jennifer jumped all over that. And she was
Yeah.
a big Steven Curtis Chapman fan too.
Yeah.
So that sure didn't hurt.
Yeah. Yeah.
As was Dr. Bell. And
Yeah. Yeah.
he loved your music too. And I
Yeah.
know for the first 2 or 3 years, y'all saw Dr. Bell and Susan every game you came to.
Yeah. Yeah. They're such dear people. Very, very sweet, amazing people, and so involved. I mean, invested in the lives of our daughters for sure, but all this, what impressed me so much and has continued to impress Mary Beth and me about Alabama is just for such a very large school. It has just felt like a very close family. It's been amazing.
Well, man, let's turn the corner a little bit. We're gonna move from the sweatshirt to the hat. And
Okay.
we're gonna
yeah,
talk
that's good.
we're gonna talk a little bit about what's represented by the logo on your hat. Of course, you and Mary Beth founded Show Hope more than 20 years ago to help families to adopt and to support vulnerable children globally and domestically. How did all that get started?
Well, it started with our adoption of Shoei, and that got started with our oldest daughter, Emily, who is Baylor Bear. Speaking of the, football teams and all of that, and she went to Baylor, but before she went to Baylor and got her education and ended up with a degree in, master's in theology, and she's a brilliant young lady, as I know Rick knows very well. She was 11 years old, went on a trip to Haiti, spent time with kids that didn't have a family. And this was the little girl that inspired a song called Fingerprints of God. She definitely was, even as a young lady, a little girl, I just couldn't be around her and not see that God's handprints and fingerprints were on her life. And she came back from that trip very, very upset about the idea that there were kids in the world without a family. And she just kind of sat us down, at 11 years old, said, "Mom, Dad, what are we doing about this? Because we need to be doing something." And I think God's told me, dude, we're supposed to adopt some of these kids and bring them into our home. And, as the story goes, we, told her that was an amazing, wonderful idea that she should absolutely do when she grew up, and had her own house. But we were done. We had 3. I was, busy on the road. She said, "Well, we need to pray about this." And so we did pray just for wisdom about how do we walk our daughter through this wonderful thing that we don't think is your calling for us, God, but we at least are going to pray. And the more we prayed, the more God kept moving us in that direction to March of 2000 when we adopted Shohana, came home, and we're immediately confronted by someday we hope to adopt, and we pray that we can't afford it, but we're doing everything we can, and the cost of adoption is just prohibitive for so many families, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. They just said, but that's our dream. And of course, having just come back from China specifically at that time, where we did get to walk through the orphanage and see the, lives of all these little ones just waiting to start with the family to say, you belong, you matter, you have a home, you have a family. And you kind of take that ache in your heart, and then all of a sudden you're looking in the eyes of a family saying, one of those children, put them in our family and not only love them, but teach them about the love of Jesus. We just can't afford it. And so that's when we started helping families just personally. And honestly, we set out to find the organization that would help families. And I was ready to sign. I'll, use my songs and phone and platform to tell people, hey, let's help these families adopt that can't afford it. And the more we looked for that organization that would do that, help those families financially, we couldn't find a specific organization, that. And so really out of just that, the necessity of seeing a need there, we thought, well, let's start this, and, God will send somebody along that has more knowledge and sense to know how to do this well, but we'll at least get the ball started and wait for God to bring the other people around. And he has brought around us, and Lifeline has been one of those who've cheered us on and supported and walked with us, and we have, partnered with to now see the dream of helping, 100 families adopt kids from anywhere in the world, anywhere in the country, here in the U.S., that we are now kind of staring down 10,000 that this next year we feel sure we'll cross the 10,000 mark of children from 63 countries that we've been able to be just a part of that story of helping those families be able to bring them into their home.
Yeah, what an incredible heritage of seeing God's faithfulness in the lives of so many families. And
Yeah, it's been amazing.
it's been fun to have a front row seat to that for a long time. And but when you guys started, uh, the culture of adoption, the culture of orphan care in the church was not what it is today. All of us
Very
that do
much.
this wish it was
Yeah.
greater. We wish there was more, but
Yeah,
it's so much different today than it was, you know, 15, 20 years ago or more.
absolutely. For
What
sure.
kind of challenges did you face in helping the church? And I'm talking Big C church here,
Yeah.
helping the church understand and embrace its role in adoption and orphan care.
Well, I mean, these as well as anybody, Rick, that, when we first started, I remember we would go into churches. I had this idea that with our director at the time when we started, a guy named Scott Hassenbog, who was our executive director, and just a real gift to us in those early chapters of the story of Show Hope. And I told Scott, if I'm playing in a town, let's go try to meet with the pastors and church leadership in that area. And, they might come, just sit down with me because they've appreciated my music and I could get a audience with them. And I remember we'd go into these meetings, um, and for the most part, I felt like, obviously there were some that got it, and were already on board and praying with us, but across the board in general, there was this sense of, you know what, we do have some people in our church who are struggling, having children biologically, and we should probably address that more and have an adoption, focus in our church for those families. And, you know, it was that process of trying to say, man, that's good. That's one
Yeah.
small part of what this
Yeah.
message is. I don't, James 1:27, our, verse for all of us that are, in this space, this is the purest form of what God himself calls religion. We've got a lot of versions of that and variations of that, but if we look at what God defines it as, it's, caring for orphans and widows. And it's like, I think this is more of an invitation from the heart of the Father to the Father, as he
Mm.
defines it in Scripture, than it is just serving our people, I think God's inviting us into something that is about building his kingdom and just his heart for the least. And those seem to be the very center bullseye of his heart, or the least of these. And so, and he's doing something here. He's inviting us into something to experience him, not just checking something off the list of things that we need to probably consider doing. And that is what we have experienced really change, I think, in the church over these years since we've been involved in just watching. It's been like a Titanic turning, it's very slow, very, I believe we have, we've seen it. I mean, the organizations like CAFO and things that didn't even exist that, as we would sit with Show Hope and with other organizations, Family Life Today and Focus on the Family and several different ones, Barb and Dennis Rainey and Jim Daly and different ones that just said, man, we need to unite our voices and just see what God wants to do in this. And we have seen some really remarkable change, and we're so thankful.
You mentioned about the turtle on the fence post. It's one of my favorite sayings, by the way. I think that's just true. I think anybody that's a follower of Jesus can probably have that as part of your testimony. God used people and circumstances, and one of those people for me is a mutual friend of ours, Russ Moore. And I remember back when we were very early on, we were in our first adoption process, and God privileged me for Russ and I to be teaching together at that time. And quick story, I was having a pity party one day, in the middle of the adoption process, back when I thought paperwork was the hard part.
Yeah, right. Wow.
And but I remember one of the things that Russ always had a way of kind of cutting to the chase. He still does. And pretty prophetic voice. And I was kind of in the mully grubs, and he listened to me really patiently that day. And then he stuck his finger up in my face, honestly, and he kind of backed me up against the wall, and he said, you don't need to forget that through this process, God's going to teach you things about himself that you'd have no other way of knowing. And
boy, isn't that true?
Man, that has come to be true in so many different ways. In ways that I understand God's heart maybe differently, in ways that I recognize that I'm not like God, and that there's still sanctification to be done. But we talk about adoption being a picture of the gospel. How has that truth reshaped the way that you personally understand God and his love as a father?
Well, I mean, that quote of from Russell has rung so true in my life. I've said it so many times that the things that I have learned about who God is and who he isn't. I think words that I never before our adoption journey I would have really kind of had to stretch to use words like winsome and wild, when God's ways. And those are some of the things that, I'd written songs about, saddle up your horses, you got a trail to blaze. Our leader is saying, let's go, and I knew it, and I knew it here, and I had a sense, that song came from a deep place of disappointment, discouragement in my own heart, that then God really met me through some brothers, pastors, and encouraged me just with his grace. But the experience of adoption, and our journey of getting to know more of the heart of God, that he isn't, when I read, the words of Jesus that, what you've done for the least of these, you've done unto me. And all of those words that are what I see now are an invitation from the Father to draw us in, to know him, to experience him in ways that we wouldn't experience him otherwise. More so than God carrying around a clipboard and peering over his glasses with a scowl, kind of checking the list, like, did you do this? Okay, well, maybe I'm going to give you a pass, on that or something. And going from that to, I use the word invitation all the time because it has been our journey, my understanding of the heart of the Father is so much more, as I've often said, it's the difference of me as a dad to my sons going, hey boys, you need to take care of it. You need to get this done. You need to do this. I'm expecting it to you. And if you don't, I'm really going to be disappointed and there's going to be, it's going to be some trouble. To a difference of a father saying, hey, come here. I got an idea. I want to do something. I want to do something with you and for you. And you're going to experience something that you wouldn't experience any other way. Now it's going to be scary. I'll take you into some hard places. But it will make us closer. We will draw closer and it will, it's going to blow your mind, to understanding the heart of the Father in that way. So when he's inviting us into these areas of it's going to be it's going to be a journey, and it's going to be mountains and valleys, but you will experience me, and that's what I'm after. That's what I want. I want you to be with me, way to know me and experience me. So yeah, that's definitely.
We're about to have some church. Like
Come
this is getting good. Folks may or may not know that are listening to the podcast, but one of the things that you and I both know in being around this world of adoption and orphan care, things have changed a lot. I think international adoptions, we are down 97% in America from from the height. I think there were 20 years ago or so, 15, 20 years ago, 20 plus thousand children were adopted into the U.S. It was under 1,200 last year.
Yeah.
Global conversation shifted toward things like family preservation and foster care and holistic care for kids. As you and Mary Beth are looking at the future, and Show Hope's mission doesn't change, but how do you see the work that Show Hope's doing evolving in kind of the changing landscape?
Oh boy. These are things we press to be where, Emily and Mary Beth could talk a lot more, probably a lot more specifically to answer the question. My sense of, when I sit in the room with the board and our friends of Show Hope and Mary Beth and I talk about it, it is, we need to continue to trust God and do the next thing. Because it can get overwhelming and you can look at that and think, okay, this is going very wrong direction. Then you can also say, but if to whatever degree it means that children are staying, are being able to stay in their country of origin, and they're being able to be, that adoption is growing in other countries, and these children are finding a home where maybe years ago they were being, and I mean, I know we're all for that and grateful for that. And that is an encouragement. But it also is a hard reality to think, wait a minute, is that, to what degree is that, are the adoptions on the decline because, something shifted that's not good for these children? And, but what we're finding at Show Hope is, we're not, we have more Christian families applying than ever have that say, we believe God has called us to adopt, and we really believe that we want to step into this. And there are no shortage of children who are on the other side of that in need of a family. And so I think for us, it's a season of just, you know what, our head nose to the grindstone of, what we've been doing, continuing to do it. Let's be as winsome as we've ever, be as wise as we've ever been. Let's be as creative as we've ever been, to keep sharing the stories, and keep telling and reminding, everyone that we can of, the invitation of God to say there are children and in need of families. And there's now, with Supreme Court decisions and, our biggest number of grants to one specific country that shifted over the years. It was China for a season, direction. Right. It's now for right here in the U.S.,
That's
for
right.
families that are saying their kids in foster care and little ones that are being born that need a family. While there are things to be, disconcerting things, there are also so many things to be encouraged by, and to just say, God's still on the throne. He's still calling us in it. Let's just keep being, keep telling the message and keep inviting people.
Well, and and I too want to say, I so appreciate the investment that you guys have made over the years in training and equipping families, training and equipping churches to be ready to,
Yeah.
to parent and to walk with kids that are coming from hard places. How that's extended globally, and in the investment that you continue to make in that sort of training being made available to people outside the U.S. in meaningful ways. And Showup's been a pioneer in all of that. And at the heart of that, there's an incredible team that that is, who we love, who I love. They're some of my favorite people on the planet. But God's used you and Mary Beth in just in amazing ways to be able to lead out in that conversation. And friend, I'm appreciative. I'm really thankful
Thank you, brother.
for the way you've allowed God to use you in that. And so just, as we kind of wind up this part of the interview, if there's a family out there listening to us that may be praying about adopting or maybe entering into foster care, what brief word of encouragement would you offer to them?
I would just say, I would sort of circle back to what we've already said. I don't think there's any way that we can experience God more profoundly, more tangibly. Adoption is the visible gospel. One person says, or a tangible expression, the most tangible expression of the gospel. And I think that the invitation to walk into what will be some unknown places and hard places, but to truly watch God do things that you won't ever see him do. I really think that's pretty, it's a pretty bold statement, but that's been our experience. I would just say, based on my experience, you will see God and experience God in ways. And it's the one prayer, I'll say this last thing. It's one prayer that I found myself praying, thinking, I think I already know the answer to this prayer. When I was praying, God, is this really something you would want us to do? Because this could really mess our plan up. And felt, again, that sort of winsomeness of the Father going, duh. If God ever said duh, I think that was a prayer. It's like, if it's kind of apparent in Scripture, it's got now on the other side of that, I didn't have this sense of God's going, I'm really going to be mad at you if you don't. I'm really going to be disappointed in you. But it was this sense of God saying, that the prayer you're praying and asking for wisdom and all of this, I've kind of made it pretty clear that if you're feeling a tug in this direction, that I'm there. I'm already there. If you want me to show up, or you're wondering, going to show up, or you're going to leave me hanging, no way I'm gonna leave you hanging on this one, because I've made it pretty clear. I've obligated myself. I've committed myself to being with you in this journey. If there was ever a journey, I've committed myself to. So that would be my encouragement to somebody thinking, is this a journey God wants us to take? I would say, as a good friend of mine called Ernie Johnson. You got that name. I called Ernie, and we're praying about adoption because our daughter's talking to us. And he said, praying about it? Why are you praying about it? You just need to do it. Go, do it. It's Ernie's story. And I'm like, you need those people in your life,
Mhm. For
Well,
sure.
as the father of an adopted son, I understand how adoption works and how meaningful it is, and how God can just absolutely put a 2-day baby boy in your lap, and you just look up and say, "Praise the Lord." And
Yeah.
well, Stephen, you've navigated through the years fame, faith, and family very publicly. How have you guarded your heart through all this and maintained perspective through all these various seasons in your life?
I would say that I've often said, it's like running out on a football field, saying, hey, come on, let's play some ball, guys. And saying, yeah, I left my helmet in the car and forgot my gear. But let's go, let's go hard. I mean, I look at the guys out on the football field, where our seats are. I can get a great understanding and appreciation for the massive human beings that these guys are. And it would be ludicrous, it'd be crazy to think, yeah, let's run out here. Let me, all 5'9" of me, run out there and say, let's play some ball, boys, in any case, but especially without any kind of, protection. And I think God, gave me enough sense early on to just realize you are fighting even more than a very violent game. You're actually fighting an enemy who is committed to destroying you and everything about you and your family and all of that. And you must put people around you that will not be impressed with anything you do or accomplish, but just care about your heart and care about your family and care that you finish this journey well. And so God has provided those people in my life. I've sought them out, seek them out. But God has just been faithful. That's one of the many layers of his goodness and faithfulness in my life, the men and women that he's put in mine and Mary Beth's life to just walk with us through this journey. And that really has been the most important thing that we could have done.
That's a good word.
Mm. Yeah.
Steven, I don't know how to say this tactfully, but the mullet's a long way in the rearview mirror, right? Like we're all of us, all of us got a little snow on the roof. We're all,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
we're all, we all, have maybe seen better days athletically or whatever. But the older I get, the more I think about legacy, the more I think about, what am I leaving? And, we've talked a lot about your legacy musically, but as a husband, as a dad, as a grandfather, what rises to the top for you in what you want to leave as a legacy?
I have a song that was on my the Still record, and the song's called Kindness. And I was really inspired by sitting at a funeral service for Mary Beth's sister's husband, Barry Morris. Sweet, wonderful, just gentle man. And it was during COVID, but he didn't get COVID. He had a cancerous brain tumor. He just retired. One grandson, so excited about just spending time with him and with his one son, and he and his wife Jeannie, that's Mary Beth's sister, and just within 6 months of the diagnosis, he was gone. And I walked through that with him, and I'd never really walked that closely with someone, that was real close to my age, just a couple of years older, and just walked that journey. And when his funeral was, we had his funeral in Springfield, Ohio, where Mary Beth was from, and her sister lives there, and her parents still. And one after another, he worked at the gas company, operated a backhoe, and these guys would get up and just, with tears in their eyes, they just would say he was kind. He was just kind. And boy, it was so powerful for me. I'd read a book recently, and it's an amazing book. You may know this book, Love Kindness. Barry Corey wrote it, president of Biola University. And it is a beautiful book about just how are we going to, live as followers of Jesus in this culture that is so divisive and so divided, and so, all of that. And he, makes a compelling argument in this book that if we're going to really do it the way Jesus did it, it's going to be the way of kindness. He talks living with a firm center and soft edges, which I love that, because it doesn't mean we're swayed by everything, that we just kind of, well, if it works for you, then that's good. That's not the kindness of Jesus. Jesus was as firm, rock solid at the center of, he was and is God, but he was kind and approachable, and people that, should not have wanted to be around Jesus were clamoring to be with him. What was that? And I think more and more that is, I don't know, something about that. Just for me, I think of the people who have impacted my life the most. The man who led really my family, my mom and dad, to Jesus, and ultimately my brother, and in life was a man named Dr. Lee Baird. He was a man who was a dentist who came through on a little revival in our town and just gave his testimony. But there was just a kindness in his life and in his eyes that I really think just reflected the heart of Jesus to my family. It's what drew my dad really to want to have a relationship with Jesus that would then impact my life and leave the legacy on my life. So I really believe that's something that I think more and more about. The people that I want, that I see that are ahead of me on the journey, that I want most to be like, are those who just seem to have the kindness of Jesus in their life.
Well, Stephen, this has been great. And we're going to wrap it up with a couple of what we call quick hit closers.
All right.
Hit closers. Okay. All right. The first one, and in your case, this may apply for the last 5 seasons only, but your favorite Alabama player of all time.
You know what?
What?
I know some Alabama players. Joe Namath. I was a fan when I was a kid.
There you go.
See, there you go. I know that. I know.
Okay.
Most unexpected moment of this podcast, right there.
Yeah, there you go. See, come on, Stevie Joy got a picture with Joe Namath a few years. No, Shoei did. She was when she was a Capstone woman. She had a picture, and she said, "Dad, do you know who this is?" I'm like, "That's Joe Namath. Of course, I know Joe Namath, because I was a big fan as a kid."
Okay.
Hey, what gives you hope for the next generation?
God is, I'm getting ready to launch this Christmas tour, and I was thinking about this the other day, and, we're going into the season of Emmanuel, God with us, that we celebrate it and we sing it and we're reminded of it, for those who have ears to hear and hearts to receive it. That is the message of Christmas more than and I'm all about jingle bells and, and all of the fun stuff too. But that is the hope. That is the message. It became so real to us, 17 years ago, our first Christmas without Maria, and I hung her stocking up the other day on our mantle again. And it's sad and it's hard and it's heavy, but God has been with us. And God is just as with us in 2025 in this crazy world and time and all of that. It's just I was just thinking about it the other day, and as with us as he was 2,000 years ago when when the word became flesh and came into our world, he is absolutely still with us. He is still just as in charge, just as in control, just as sovereign, just as good. He's not panicked. He's not, biting his nails, wondering how this is all going to turn out. That is the hope for any generation, certainly for us now.
Yeah. Last question. What is the favorite song you've ever written to perform live?
Well, I already kind of, as I said, I tipped off earlier. Favorite songs are the hard questions. I love, there's a song on my Signs of Life album called Lord of the Dance. It's probably got my favorite guitar riff to play live in concert. It's just a fun, kind of bluesy, swampy, and so I just love playing that one. So live, I'd probably put that up there right at the top. Thank you, guys.
Awesome.
Steven, thank you so much.
We want to encourage all of our listeners to subscribe to us on YouTube, Apple, or Spotify, and encourage you to join the National Alumni Association. They do some great things there with events and scholarships and camaraderie and chapter meetings all over. Also, Yay Alabama, our official collective of the University of Alabama. So, and then we have the Title Towel, which is there behind Rick Morton right now. Go to whitwillsports.com and order your Title Towel. Stephen, you need to get a Title Towel.
There you go.
I know. I don't have one of those in my studio.
Well, welcome to Crimson. Thank you so much for joining. This has been special for Rick and me.
You're sure welcome, guys. Appreciate you both very much. Thank you.
Steven, we always end this podcast the same way. And so we need for you to give the folks a big Roll Tide.
Roll Tide. Roll.